County, Santa Cruz. This is Feedback at 5 with Teresa Wright.
Hi, I'm Teresa, and welcome to Feedback at 5. We're going to put some information on your screen, and that information pertains to young people who are in the foster care system and their success rate in school. And as you look at this, you are looking at what some have described as just dishearteningly poor results. You see it there on your screen. There are a number of challenges that they face and a number of results that are going on right now. And so that's why I'm really pleased to introduce you to two people who are going to be here talking about how they have partnered together. This is really a partnership between organization and institutions and the National Center of Youth Law, and it's a pilot initiative program that's being launched in Santa Cruz County designed to address those very things that you see on your screen. Let me introduce my guests who are here, and then they're going to tell us why this is such a cool project and why you really should be concerned about it, because some people will think, well, it's somebody else's kids, it doesn't pertain to them, but really this is something that pertains to all of us in this community. My guest is Rachel Velkoff-Holtz, who is the manager of the Foster Ed Initiative with the National Center for Youth Law, and Jimmy Cook, who is the program manager of CASA Santa Cruz County, one of the organizations that has partnered with you on this project. And let me start by maybe having each of you explain your organization and who you represent, and then tell us why this is something that we all need to be concerned about, because most people will think, or some people might think, well, it's those foster kids and doesn't really pertain to me, and somebody will take care of it. So Jimmy, let me start with you and tell people about CASA and what your focus and your mission is.
Sure. Thank you, Teresa.
You're welcome.
So CASA is an organization that trains, recruits volunteers in our community to work with children that have been abused, neglected, or abandoned, and end up in the dependency welfare system or foster care program. And CASA stands for Court Appointed Special Advocate. And what we do is train volunteers to work with children, be their voice in the court system, meet with a child once a week, learn who they are, learn about their needs, and advocate for them through the court system by collaborating with the different partners that work with children that get involved in the system, like therapists, the schools, foster care parents, birth parents as well, and to make sure that their needs are being met.
Now, let me back you up for just a second, because what you said is a mouthful, and most people will think, well, there's systems in place for that already, and why do you need somebody to go in there and be the voice of the child? I mean, you've got, the legal system in place, you've got the foster parent there, so why is it so important that you have a CASA advocate be there?
Sure. There's a lot of elements at play here. Once a child is removed from their birth parents, the parents have rights to participate in services to reunify, and so a social worker is assigned to work with them in order to facilitate that process and manage a case and link them to resources in the community to help them change their circumstances in order to change their behavior to make their home safe to bring their child home. And so in that process, they do pay attention to what's happening to the child, but a social worker, because of the limitations to the resources they have access to, and because of their caseloads and the amount of work that's on their plate, they only get a chance to see a child maybe once a month, maybe a couple times a month, and they generally are reaching out to other people to help them understand what the child's needs are.
So, because you come from a social services background, you used to be a social worker, right, for 8 years or so. So typically for a social worker, how many clients, what was the typical caseload for you?
It ranges around 30 kids, sometimes lower 20s, sometimes upper 30s, but I'd say the average high 20s, 30 children, and about 20 families.
Right.
And each of those families is visited every single month. So you can imagine how much time they have to spend with each family, as well as engaging in some communication with all the different partners and service providers that are working with these families.
And so that then leads me back to why a CASA is so critical, because a CASA has been described as the voice of the child. It's the one person who's constant throughout the entire process, who is with that child, represents that child, and is looking out for what's the best interest of that child,
Yeah,
right?
their sole focus is that child, to make sure their needs are being met wherever they reside, whether they're with their birth family or in a foster care home or in a relative placement where they might stay for up to 6, 12, 18 months, or maybe forever.
Right.
And so their focus is on that child. They show up every single week to meet with that child and spend time with them and really get to know what their needs are and what their challenges are so they can advocate for them.
And so when you're talking about advocating, they actually go into the courtroom and will speak on behalf of for that child, and sometimes that voice might be counter to what somebody else is saying because their focus is the child, correct?
Sometimes that happens. We tend to do a lot of collaboration with all the service providers, and so the volunteer, and another thing to mention is that the CASA is the only volunteer in the team.
Okay.
Everybody else is a paid professional.
Right.
And so this volunteer is participating with the team in order to focus on the child. And so they will bring that child's voice into the room wherever they go.
Okay.
And make sure that that's being heard in court, and they write a court report every 6 months and provide that to the court along with the social worker's report.
Okay.
And it's read by the judge, and that's part of the judge's assessment to determine what the outcomes are going to be for the court order.
So Rachel, let's bring you in this. I don't want to leave you out here too long. So tell me about the Law Center then, and why it's a natural that you would partner with an organization like CASA. What is the Law Center, and then why this project? What is foster ed?
Thanks, Teresa. The National Center for Youth Law is a nonprofit organization based up in Oakland, and we work on a variety of different issues impacting children in poverty. So mental health issues, juvenile justice issues. One of our main areas of work is child welfare issues. The Foster Ed Initiative, which is the project I work on, is a project specifically devoted to trying to find and implement ways to improve educational outcomes for children in the foster care system. So that is our particular focus within that project. And what we do is we'll go into a particular jurisdiction. So we're working in Santa Cruz County as a pilot for the state of California, and we partner with local agencies such as CASA. We also partner with the County Office of Education, the Santa Cruz County Juvenile Court System, the Child Welfare Agency in Santa Cruz County, and a number of other community organizations, and design and implement a project to try and help find ways to improve how kids who are in the foster care system are doing in school.
Right.
So I think CASA is certainly a natural partner for that project, and has it's been a great experience working with them. We try to bring together the different agencies and organizations in the community already working on these issues to try to work together to figure out how to solve this problem of the low educational outcomes of children in care.
So, you know, I had those stats up at the beginning of the show, and I want to put them up now, and I want us to walk through them because I think it's important that people understand why this is important. I mean, you can imagine a child's been taken out of their home, the trauma, the circumstances of why they were taken out in the first place. Then they have to deal with the fact that they're out of their home and they're being placed with in the foster care system. And so all of that trauma and all of the stuff that a child is dealing with, I would imagine school is probably the last thing that they're thinking of, or it's just, I'm here and I can just have a safe haven for a moment, but I'm not thinking about I've got to take a test, or I've got to do this assignment or that. So let's put them on the screen and let's just kind of walk through them and have you guys walk through these one by one. So it says that there are poor educational outcomes. So do you want to just take them point by point? Who wants to address this one?
Well, I'd like to say that one of the things that is one of the big challenges here is that the child welfare system is addressing safety and risk issues.
Yes.
And so although well-being is tied to education, it's not necessarily a mandate for that to be a focus.
Okay.
And so when they're focusing on basic needs, which are the most important thing,
right,
thinking about hierarchy of needs, education sort of falls by the wayside sometimes.
Okay.
And so when you look at this first bullet, high rates of absenteeism and disciplinary referrals, going back to what you were recognizing is that there's a lot of trauma involved in what's happening with these kids being removed from their parents, having been in a situation that was harming them, potentially making them afraid. Going to school is not their priority. And so oftentimes you see absenteeism go up. Maybe the child's been neglected and they haven't, the focus hasn't been on school, and the parent hasn't been focusing on that because they're focusing on other things.
Right.
Maybe they're struggling financially and they need to keep a kid home to take care of another child.
Right.
So there's all sorts of reasons that could lead to that.
Okay. Yeah. And then the thing about, Rachel, do you want to weigh in on this next one about grade levels?
Sure. So children in the foster care system in many instances transition from one home placement to another, often transition from one school placement to another. Every time they go through these transitions, it forces transitions in adjusting to a new teacher, adjusting to new classmates, sometimes missing days of school, falling behind in school. And the statistics show that on average, foster children, because of these issues and many more, are more likely to perform below their grade level or to be held back in school.
And then the dropout rate is also increased, right?
Right, the dropout rate is higher as well. Again, these youth are experiencing a lot of trauma, multiple transitions, all of which together can lead to these lower outcomes.
And and you're saying multiple transition, and it's sort of, it's sort of the speak of the language, the field of which you all are in, but when you stop and really think about what that means, it means a kid being taken out of their home and then being placed someplace with strangers, and then being pulled out of that home and that school and the friends and being placed someplace else. And I think if any of us were to stop and to think about that and think about what that would do to ourselves, let alone a child, and especially a young child who doesn't understand, or who may be feeling like it's their fault somehow, that's gut-wrenching.
Yeah, overnight they lose their community, their family, their school, their friends. Just about everything changes, and like you said, they go into a new environment where the food's different, the use of the restroom's different, their clothing may change because they're not able to take all of that with them. Often it happens in the middle of the night, and so it's quite a scary adventure that is not necessarily positive in any way. And so that makes it really, really difficult to focus on something like education when all of that shifts.
And on top of that, a lot of youth in care don't have one adult in their lives who is consistently monitoring and supporting their education in a way that a parent most often would. So that's where this effort comes in.
This might be a real extreme example, but what comes to mind to me, and I think it was the thing that was so much gut-wrenching when this incident happened, because I think it captured the nation, the Elyon Gonzalez. Remember when he was snatched out of that home in Florida to be given back to his father, and those images that went out on the TV screen of authorities coming in and taking this child, and his crying, and it was gut-wrenching. And that to me is what you're describing, not maybe to that extreme, but it's still the same gut-wrenching reaction for a child, I would think, who's in those circumstances.
Sure. Obviously that was a situation that was pretty specific and special because of the immigration issues and everything involved there. But the experience for the child was very similar for most of the kids that we work with. To have to move without having a say, they don't have a choice in any of this. Most times they're going somewhere where they don't know the family. Fortunately, in Santa Cruz County, they do a good job of trying to get them with relatives or a friend. So about half the kids end up in a somewhat friendly environment, but still, even in that case, oftentimes they have to transfer schools and maybe even school districts. And that can lead to maybe falling behind several months, maybe even half a year, because of all the newness, trying to jump into a new environment, and it happens in the middle of a school year. And it makes it really difficult.
All right, we're going to go to the break, and then we'll come back and continue our discussion. As we go to the break, those of you who watch Dr. Phil know that this is an issue that's close to his heart, and he and his wife are ambassadors and spokespeople for CASA. So we're going to show a little clip here with them talking about why CASA is so important to them. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back.
I'm going to do a shameless plug here because I am so passionate about this. Robin and I are national spokespeople for CASA. And I don't know if you know about CASA, but CASA is court-appointed special advocates. And sometimes you don't have a time to make a commitment like Jackie has done here to be a child's full-time guardian or even a foster parent for a brief period of time. If you can't do that, this is an excellent way to be involved. And I'm going to tell you what happens is these kids get into the foster care system. And the caseworkers are hugely overworked. I mean, they have a stack of files they can't possibly get through, and so these kids fall through the cracks. They don't have anybody to look after them. If you become a CASA volunteer, you are appointed as an officer of the court, and you are an advocate for 1 or 2 children a year, and you check up on them, you help them through the court system. You're a warm and friendly face for them in an intimidating situation. It is a wonderful way. You may not have the money to give, you may not be able to be a foster parent, but you can be an advocate that helps 1 or 2 children a year, and we need thousands and thousands more. So we really, really want to do this. So.
We're back, and as you see on your screen, CASA has some volunteer training dates coming up, and each time we go to the break in and out, we're going to put the dates up so you see it there on your screen, and we will give you their website and their phone number so you can follow up and call them regarding the volunteer opportunity and the training. So let's talk now. We saw all the results, and there's one more graphic information that I want to put up, because it talks about if these kids are not successful in school, then they face a whole lot of challenges, and the odds increase tremendously in terms of what they face. So we'll put that up on your screen. I want you to see that, because without them being successful in school, the challenges they face are higher rates of homelessness, incarceration, and unemployment. So with that said, Rachel, foster ed, tell us how this is going to work.
Sure. So as we mentioned, the goal of foster ed is to come together as a county and try and address these issues, try and improve these outcomes. So what the process involves is when a child enters care, our project team worked to identify someone in the child's life who can serve as the child's educational champion. So the idea here is to identify someone who is going to say, yes, I will step up and play the role that an actively engaged parent might play in supporting the child's education. So that can range from things to, having conversations with the child about how's school going, how are you doing in this class, what do you want to do when you grow up, do you think you want to go to college someday, trying to set those expectations, having high aspirations for the child's success.
Right.
For a child who's receiving special education services, it might mean helping that child navigate through that process. So we identify who in the child's life can serve as the child's educational champion. Whenever possible, we try to identify a biological parent or a family member, someone who is likely to be in the child's life long term. Because the idea here is, let's build up the capacity of this person using resources, using training and mentoring, such that now and when the child exits care, there's someone who's going to be in their life long term playing that role.
Right.
So we conduct a strengths and needs survey to try and see what are the areas where some support is needed. We look at the children's educational records to see what is the educational situation this child is currently in, how are they doing, what areas are they struggling in. Based on that, project staff will develop an educational intervention plan.
Yeah, I was going to say a plan has to go into place.
Exactly. A plan for what are some goals that need to be worked on for this child, what are some goals for the educational champion to try and reach to better support the child. And then we work with a variety of community partners, such as CASA, such as other service providers within the community, to figure out how can we get this educational champion the support they need to really play this role, and what services do we need to connect the child with? Do they need tutoring? What kinds of supports do they need?
So there's a lot of training and awareness raising in the, I imagine an adult is what you're talking about. So there's a lot of awareness and training that has to go on, and the support for them to be able to step to the, you might have somebody who is capable of doing that, but if they're not, you want to have all the skills in place to make sure that you can help them be successful at it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I would imagine that a lot of parents, and you're in your roles, you've encountered where you have parents that are adults that may have doubts about their ability to help their child in their school, or they're too busy trying to just be able to earn some money to support the family. So that's a real fine balancing act.
Sure. Certainly there are parents who may not realize, or family members who may not realize, that they have the power to really positively impact the child's education, even by doing these little things like, did you do your homework today? Let's talk a little bit about school. Do you think you might want to go to college someday? So those little things even can make a big difference.
Right.
So part of it is project staff working with the educational champion and making them aware of that ability they have to really help the child, and then helping them generate ideas about how they might do that, starting sometimes with small goals, and working their way up to the bigger things and making sure they have the support to get there.
I love that you're calling them education educational champions. I think that's very, very cool, you know, and the champion of the child. So is the educational champion, it's almost as if they're like an advocate, a CASA volunteer. I mean, they're the champion all along the process for this child, hopefully.
Sure, yeah. They're going to be the educational advocate for the child, working often, you know, in collaboration with others on a team supporting the child.
Right. Okay, well, let's go to another break and then we'll come back and wrap up. And as I said earlier, as we go to the break, we're going to put up some more training dates for CASA volunteers. This is, again, CASA Santa Cruz County, their volunteer training dates. We're going to take another short break and come right back. Volunteer training for CASA. And with that said, Jimmy, what does it take to be a CASA volunteer? Because I think people will think, oh my God, you know, do I have the ability to go in there and to be in the courtroom and be speaking about life-changing things for a child? So what does it take?
Sure, just caring about a child. A willingness to participate in a child's life and be a voice for them in court. Obviously, we do background checks to make sure everybody's cleared in order to be safe with the child. But we provide a 35-hour training for them to learn about what the child welfare system's like, what it's like to work with a child that's been traumatized, what it's like to work with a team that's focusing on a child's needs, and potentially working with a birth family that may have got involved in the system because they had abused or neglected their child, and how to deal with those challenges.
So if I were to ask you what you know, looking at your volunteers, what do they look like? They run the gamut from this age to this age to...
They look like you and me and anyone else we see out there in the community. We have about 40% of our current volunteers are fully employed or working on in some fashion. We have some retirees. We have many different folks from different walks of life. You have to be 21 years old or older. And we have advocates all the way up to 80 years old. And with all sorts of different experiences. Most advocates don't know a lot about the foster care system when they start this process, and it is quite daunting at first. But we provide a lot of support for them. We have a team of supervisors that assist them with this process. We don't ever leave them out there in the cold by themselves. We're available to them all the time, and we walk them through the steps of how to advocate for the child.
And they're dealing with gut-wrenching stuff, you know?
No, you know, most of it is actually doing fun stuff with a child. That's the best way to get to know a kid, is to get down on the floor, play with them, learn what they like to do, and start to relate to them. And through that process is where you see some really beautiful relationships develop.
Yeah. Now let me ask you, Rachel, how can the public support foster ed and even the law center?
Well, as part of the Foster Ed Project in Santa Cruz County, we're looking for community volunteers who are interested in being educational mentors to educational champions. So they would be matched actually one-on-one with educational champions to try to provide them with some mentoring and support on the goals that they're working on to support the child. So there's information and application available on our website, which is www.fostered.org.
And there's also the email address if you want to email somebody.
So we would love it if anyone who's interested could contact us for more information, and we'll be happy to tell you more about the training and the volunteer opportunities.
And we've got a minute, so we're going to put up the CASA website as well. But Jimmy, beyond being a CASA volunteer, there are other ways that your organization can be supported.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways. If they go on the website, they can read specifically about that, but they can participate in many ways. Donations obviously is another way. Volunteering at our house, providing all sorts of different support for the program. There's lots of different things they can do.
And on that note, we're going to end it. I want to thank you both for being here.
Thank you so much.
You can make a difference. Go to either one of their websites and find out how. We'll see you next week.